All right, well, good morning. We're going to start on time because we have a tight timeline. And what's 7 minutes between when I'm supposed to stop yapping my gums and we're supposed to be able to pee and get coffee and get to the next class? I'm not thinking that's going to work out so we'll keep moving right along. So as the lead slide suggests, I'm Dennis Potter. I come from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I got started doing critical incident stress management in 1985 by accident. And the accident was I was hired by our local community mental health board to bring a bunch of programs that were scattered around the community into one organization, one program, which included the 24-hour access, assessment referral by a master's prepared clinician. Somebody goes into the psych hospital, somebody goes into the substance abuse world, somebody goes to outpatient, that kind of a thing. We had a suicide hotline, was part of the program, small outpatient piece that went with it. And it was pretty much standardized while we were the crisis unit. We were thinking more in terms of the traditional mental health crisis stuff. So we've been open about 6 weeks. Boss calls me, been a problem. Okay, there's a problem, you want me to take care of it? I'm on probation, what do you want? And she told me this was a 16-year-old young man, volunteer preschool program of a small community church, arrested for allegedly sexually molesting one of the children. The second child got identified and they determined during the 2 years that he'd been a volunteer, 60 different children had been in the program, equal opportunity molester. Nobody could be automatically eliminated from the possibility of go do something. So we scratched our heads and pulled together some folks, and we organized a response and accidentally made some brilliant decisions that day. And I say accidentally because we had no clue what we were doing. Brilliant because they worked. Isn't that the true definition of brilliance? Trying something new and it works, you're brilliant. Try something new, it doesn't work, you're an idiot. Okay? So we did some small group stuff. We let people ventilate. We tried to validate their emotion. We tried to teach them some things to do. Sound familiar? So we get done with that. Fast forward. About 6 months later, murder, suicide in one of our mental health agencies. Staff person killed her boss in the office at lunch, killed herself. Go do something. Well, what did we do last time? Well, we kind of went in, kind of in a group, and kind of let them talk. And for some reason or other, and I don't remember what, I couldn't be at that one. Friday afternoon, the shooting took place at noon. I got people there, the CISM outpatient clinicians there, 2 of them. Early afternoon, they did their work, went home, and then on Monday morning, when they came to work, I called them into my office to find out, so how did it go? And I discovered that I had sent 2 seasoned outpatient folks out, and then they didn't talk about their experience together. Then they went home, and they spent the weekend beating themselves up. Oh, I could have done this, or did I do the right thing, or any of that. And it wasn't until Monday morning when we started talking it through that they kind of let go of the impact on them. So I made a decision that very day that never again would I ever send a team out to do something that wasn't going to have an opportunity to spend time chatting afterwards about the experience. So it didn't take a rocket science to figure out that we were going to get called out on these kind of things. So started looking around for models to do it, discovered Jeff, got the training, became an approved instructor, and I think my friend Paul and I were going through the approved instructor program for the advanced group stuff. And there was this World Congress coming up. I think it was the 3rd World Congress. I'll tell you how long ago it was. And Jeff was teaching us the approved instructor thing, and I said, Jeff, he was talking about debriefing the debriefers. And some of us old timers have been around a while, we remember the hold a conversation, debriefing the debriefer. And I said, Jeff, you always talk about that, but you never really talked about how to do that. And we've been doing it in a fashion in Kent County for a long time. But I'd like to kind of know what you're thinking on. And you got this World Congress coming up. What a great idea for a breakout session. And then you can teach us how to do it. Always be careful what you ask for. As Jeff looked and said, you're right, Dennis. You're on. You got a 90-minute breakout session. World Congress, third World Congress. And my friend Paul, who you'll meet on video towards the end, looked at me and had that great Oliver Hardy look on his face. What have you gotten me into now? So it forced us to really organize our thinking a bit, and we put together a presentation, and I've been back ever since. So all this is really, come on in, is a structure, a suggested structure that you might use to work with your team members after they have been out on a call. Okay? So how many of you have that as a part of your standard operating procedure? I know Dan does. Yeah, Harvey. Okay, good. So today may be a refinement of what you're doing, and what I expect from you folks that raised your hand is when I'm kind of done, tell me a little bit about what's different about how you do it, because this isn't the way to do it, this is a way to do it. And you need to do it in a way that makes sense for you and your team, but I think there are going to be some principles that hopefully we talk about today that will get us there.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could we have the lights down a little bit, please, Dean?
Yeah, I might have that up here. Is that doing anything? How's that? That better up here? The glow doesn't hit you in the eyes anymore? All right, so why do it? The biggest thing I truly think is the idea that, and even after all these years of doing it, and hundreds of these that I've done over the years, it gets pretty easy for me on my drive home. Oh, you could have said that better. Oh, yeah. And then we might have been able to, either that whole thing around, I don't care how experienced we are. And I think it's really healthy, because the moment I don't try to examine, is there something I could have done a little differently, a little better, then I probably ought to stop doing the work. There's always that opportunity for a tweak or a twist or something. So we want to reduce vicarious traumatization by team members for having listened to the stories. We want to reduce any cumulative stress in terms of people going on too many calls too close together. But last but certainly not least, that idea of critical self-judgment. We want to teach the team, if there is something that we did that wasn't so good, how can we do it differently in the future? We want to teach elements of doing the work and taking care of ourselves. And last but not least, we want to remember to practice what we just told all of them about taking care of self and stress management. We want to increase effectiveness, increase longevity, increase learning, increase our own stress management skills, decrease chance for personal reactions, take care of ourselves, and of course monitor the team. So when to do it? The best time of doing it is when you're done with your work of that day. Because how many times are you going to be able to get those 2 or 3 people back together again at the same time in the next few days? Somewhere between slim and none. Okay? So I like the idea of doing it at the end of our day and before we disperse. Now, if you're on a multi-day event, you might do a little mini one and then save the full-fledged one for a little later. So many years ago, actually February of 2002, I was a tiny, infinitesimal, small part of the response to NYPD. And the pop-up police officers providing peer assistance had their EAP had reached out to the CISM to send teams of 3 law enforcement officers and 1 mental health for a 1-week time stretch that we started it in about November and wrapped it up, I think, in about October the following year. So teams from all over the U.S. and Canada. Michigan sent 19 teams, I believe. Canada sent 20 some odd. They're a whole country. We're just one state. Okay. So while we were there, the team that I was with, every night we had dinner together and we just kind of checked in. Okay. And then at the end of the week, TAPA staff did a pass for us on Friday afternoon. The other thing that we had set up in Michigan was that 1 week after you returned, they went out under the sponsorship of Michigan Crisis Response Association. 1 week after you returned, you did it again because we had spent 5 or 6 days there. Takes a few days to really unwind when you come back home. And so there were 2 things that people had to sign off on. One, the team leader had to sign off that they would provide a pass within 1 week of their team's return, and everyone who went had to sign that I'll attend it. And hopefully most of those things occurred. Where? Someplace away from the crew that you just worked with. But I can tell you that in Michigan, at least with the Midwest Michigan team, probably 90% of them were going in the parking lot. Standing around the cars just before we get off. If we're lucky enough to have driven someplace together, we'll do it in the car while we're driving back. Okay? And I can tell you in Michigan in wintertime, they go a lot faster. But usually that's where we're going to do it. Now occasionally, if it's one of those that are more powerful, if there's more stuff, you really want to pick a neutral site that you go to where it's private and you can do it. Okay? Somewhere private if you're really thinking that your folks might be affected. So I happen to be on call for the Midwest Michigan team, and a local suburban police department that had been in existence for about 20 years just had their first homicide. And it was a big deal because it was a triple. 17-year-old young man killed his mom, killed his 14-year-old sister, 8-year-old sister, baseball bat and a knife. Yeah, you all watched way too much NCIS. So I get the call, get all the logistics, organize the team to go, and when I got the team all set and we were ready to roll, we were going in the next day, I called my friend Paul. And I said, Paul, I'm leading the team, we're going to go into the blank PD, and before I got my next question, I said, what time are you going to be done and when are you going to show up? He knew I was calling him to do a pass. And he organized it at his workplace in the conference room. Because sometimes you want that, I expected to hear a lot of graphic descriptions of the crime scene, the bodies, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to make sure the team I was with and me, well, let me rephrase it, I wanted me and the team I was with to make sure we got taken care of when we were done. So how long does it take? Usually probably about 10 minutes. Okay. And for kind of usual ones, maybe 6 or 7. If it's a part of the routine of what you do, it really doesn't have to take very long. Ones that are a little more, but don't let them blow past it. We want to be checking in, just in case, because I know none of your team members, and certainly none of you in this room, would ever deny kind of having a little vibration going on after one of those, especially in a team leader sort of role where I have to be strong and take care of all of my people, because after all, I am, and I got a highly scientific phrase for that. It's called bovine excrement. All right? We need to be honest, and we need to model for our team being willing to admit if we got touched. Because if we don't model it, why would we expect them to be willing to talk about it? Abnormal ones may take a little longer. Okay, what's the difference? You've been doing this long enough. You kind of know those that you can anticipate having more power than those that may not. So like I said, with this police department, everyone on the department who was working that day was in the crime scene. We did the crime scene text. So we had like 22 people in that particular CISD. And anticipatory, of course. It turned out that the kid had actually washed down the crime scene, taken a shower, washed his clothes before he called the police, and he was trying to say that somebody broke in and did it. And it wasn't until they hit it with the black light that they could see anything. So it wasn't as horrific a scene as we had anticipated, but it was still good that we took the extra precautions. Wake up. Who does it? Event team leader. Now, the Midwest Michigan team, if I happen to be the on-call guy, when we send out a text to everybody and we need something, who's available, and we ask you to say yes or no if you're available, and no is equally important to saying yes, because if you don't tell me no, I think maybe you're still available, kind of thing. And so if I'm the one who's coordinating this because I'm on call, the first person who comes in with seasoning is my event team leader. It's not always the most seasoned person. It's the first one who comes in with some seasoning. And then I look for the least experienced person, and then whoever the other third warm body is. Okay? So sometimes it's just the event team leader that walks through. Sometimes it can be the most seasoned person on the team, someone who didn't take the lead, a little more of a fallback position. It doesn't really matter. Of those that might be more powerful, I suggest pretty strongly, as I did with the example, that you have someone who was not on scene, who did not participate at all in the event, is totally clean of the event to do it. Okay, so they're not contaminated, so to speak, by having done the work itself. So how do you do it? Well, of course, because it came out of a social worker and a psychologist, it's like rocket science. It's extremely complex. Practically nobody could understand. No. You know, you got a couple of street guys who kind of evolved this thing. And so it kind of comes down to basically 3 steps. Kind of a combination of all the group stuff that we already do. Review, responses, remind. Okay? So what is this review phase? One of the things that we have not done well in the 30 plus years that CISM has been around and operational is evaluating the quality of the work that we do. And we've seen in the big sessions, people have done research, and that's fantastic. I am so grateful to all those people who do it. But on the street level, how do I know how we did today? We don't have that. And I spent 3 years working for an organization called Crisis Care Network. And Crisis Care Network, I was their director of training and consultant relations, I think my title was. It was a marvelous 3 years because I got paid for thinking about this stuff and tweaking this stuff and creating training videos for our consultants that we did about 1,100 call-outs a month across the country, utilizing master's prepared clinicians from the various localities. discussion. And I got challenged by my boss. We need to figure out a way to measure the quality. And I kept trying to figure out a way of doing that. You go into a company, typically, you can't really ask them, so how do you think we did today? You're working on behalf of an EAP when you're there, so my local consultant really didn't, we were the flow through of the money, they really worked for, and the EAPs, quite honestly, didn't seem to be interested in trying to do stuff. So the best I came up with is that we did 1,100 call-outs a month. I was in charge of all complaints, and we got about 8 or 9 complaints a month. That was like 0.001%. So that's a fairly good indication that the consultants did a good enough job out there, but there was no good measure of quality. And of those 8 complaints, there were probably about 3 or 4 that I considered to be valid. And when I say considered to be valid, it wasn't that they wore wrinkled clothing, shirt wasn't ironed, wore flip-flops, and I checked with the consultant, it was like a $300 pair of brand name leather sandals that didn't have a heel strap on it, so it flopped against her heel. Flip-flops, showed too much skin, didn't shave closely enough. I mean, there was stuff there that really. So, but I'm still even to today interested in trying to figure out how to do it. So, as Paul and I were putting this together, what we decided to do in the review phase, the first thing we're going to talk about is how, quality-wise, how do you think it went? And we don't ask all these questions, these are just sample questions. How do you think it went? How do you think the team did? How do you think you did? Was there anything you did in this intervention today that you wished you'd done differently? Is there anything you didn't do that you wish you had done? What's the ditziest thing you did when you were there? Ditzy obviously isn't a word. The answer to that question, this is the thing I did that I think is the stupidest thing that's ever been done in the history of doing CISM. And then you look at the team, especially if you weren't in the room, or even if you were in the room. So, when Hans did that, what was the reaction of the group?
I don't remember him doing it.
We become legends in our own mind. Frequently, that self-criticism that we have, nobody noticed. At the end did an intervention, it was a suicide by hanging. And I happened to be doing the teaching re-entry phase of that intervention. Got all done, met with the pass, and my team member looked at me and said, "Do you know what you said?" No, I have no freaking clue what I said. When you were wrapping up, your last phrase for the group was, "Hang in there." Now, it's a throwaway phrase. It was something I said a lot. I started to work hard at eliminating that from my vocabulary ever, because it was a throwaway phrase. I wasn't thinking about it. Okay, let's pay attention to those kind of things. So my lesson learned was you got to stop using that phrase at all so it doesn't accidentally come back in. So let's say fortunately nobody in the group reacted. My team member heard it, or team members heard it, but it wasn't a big deal in the group apparently. They forgave me apparently. Okay. But let's say somebody did do something that was a little disruptive or didn't go so well. So what do? Beat them up? Pick them off the team? Blame them? No, the whole point of the critique is what were you intending to do? What were you trying to do? How might you have done it differently? What do you think, team? How could we have handled that? Or what words could have been said that would have done it better? In the review phase, it's all about teaching to do it better, teaching to do it differently, tweaking it, not about criticism. Big difference between critique and criticism. And just like we do when we're doing our CISM work around validating and teaching, that's what the review phase is all about. So response. What we're going after here is the idea, was there anything about this that was particularly difficult for you? Was there anything about this one that got past your invisible protective shield? Was there anything about this one that snuck in and grabbed you? Okay. So this is where we're looking for the possibilities of vicarious traumatization. Okay. What was the hardest part of this one for you? What's kind of going on in your gut right now, if anything? Is there anything about this one that caught you by surprise? Anything about this one that kind of got you? The whole idea is to get it on the table, validate it, okay, and move on to the remind phase. And the remind phase is to practice what we preach. Okay? My key phrase usually is, so what are you going to do to take care of yourself tonight? What are you going to do to take care of yourself over the next 24 hours? And if my friend Paul was here, he would say, and I always hated it when Dennis asked this question, because then I would say, well, I'm going to go home and I'm going to walk the dog for 3 miles, and then I'm going to sit and tell my wife all of the processes that I've gone through my thinking on having responded to this thing, and then I'm going to sit and get some carrots and celery and watch something on NPR. And I know what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home and put my ass in the recliner with a double scotch and turn on Forensic Files. But he makes me think about some things that I might do if I, in fact, was bothered by it a little bit. Okay? So my idea here is if you tell me you have plans, great, what are they? Because if you're going to lie to me, you're going to lie to me in detail. It's not that I necessarily care what you actually do. What I want you to be doing is thinking about what you could be doing for taking care of self over the next day, the next 24 hours or so, or this evening. Okay? So questions or comments on the actual structure. It's pretty straightforward, hopefully fairly easy to understand because it came out of my brain, so it should be. I think it's a pretty simple brain. All right, so we're going to watch one. It's put on by my friend Paul. He's doing the task. And I want you to think about the structure. Watch the structure it goes. So the team, consisting of the famous Mr. Harvey Burnett, Sue Elvin, Harvey's right here in the front. He's trying to hide. Harvey and Sue had done a diffusing, and then they invited me to attend, and so I had been part of a CISD in a workplace, double murder-suicide. Estranged husband comes in, kills wife, kills a male employee that may or may not have been connected, and then was confronted by police officers in the parking lot and killed himself. It's based on a real incident, but it was a role play. Okay? So let's see what Paul does.
This is a task, post-action staff support, topic of which is your whole response. So I want you to talk when I ask you a question, the first one, of course, being how did it go? Talk about either the diffusing or the debriefing or both. Okay. So how did it go? What did you do and how did you feel about it?
Well, I think it went pretty well. Both the diffusing and the debriefing. I for sure felt, as we went through the process for both that I think we were able to get through it pretty fluidly. I think the participants who were involved seemed to respond pretty well to what was taking place.
A lot of participation.
Yes, there was a lot of participation, actually.
They really supported each other. I mean, you don't see that a lot in manufacturers. I mean, we both have health backgrounds. We're in a manufacturing plant, and they were very supportive of each other, and they identified that they, one was having nightmares, someone else would say that, or one was scared or angry. There was some crosstalk there that you usually don't see in blue collar, if you wanna tag it that way.
So that must have been kind of pleasant.
Yeah. And I think we said they were very supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And I mean, that seemed to come very naturally and very early on in the process. Usually, I'm used to debriefings where you kind of go through and give the facts and then you're moving on and like you're saying anything until you get to the reaction phase. And this kind of started early on.
And this was both the diffusing and
Well, here I thought you guys had magical processes because coming in just for the CISD, and I was watching that and thought, wow, you two must have set this up because these folks are here, they're there, and they're really supportive and they're just doing this great job of getting their stuff out and supporting one another, which I assume that was something that you had done.
It started about halfway through the diffusing. Yeah, all of a sudden, someone spoke up and started to validate what someone else had said. And I'm looking at her and going, really?
now usually you get a natural helper or two maybe, but it sounds like you may have had more than that.
I think all but babies. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
That's very supportive.
so did you guys feel that the process was similar in between the diffusing and the debriefing? I mean,
Yeah, and I think the diffusing or the debriefing was definitely an extension of the diffusing. I felt that for a lot of them, we just sort of picked up and moved on.
okay.
But they're able to share, I think, a little bit more.
Yeah, more details.
Details, but also more of their reactions that they kind of wanted to get out. About what their experiences were. And I think they also had time to,
Yeah.
since the diffusing to, sit and now things are kind of starting to pour in, the automatic pilot stuff is turned on, and now they're kind of experiencing some of their normal reactions that you might see.
I started to process a little bit what happened.
So it was good. What says? Were there any surprises?
The surprises for me were what we didn't hear. Usually in those type of situations, there's some blaming going on, maybe of management not keeping them safe or not in medical. You hear. I never heard any blaming. It was targeted at why did he do this? Why did she do this? No blaming of anybody else, which we just sort of I kept expecting it to happen, especially because we had management in the room.
Right.
We had two management people in the room.
There was a hint to that, but I
You knew that early, you got into it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And how did that mix? That went okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, they felt free to.
I think they felt free. I think in the debriefing part, I think the one who's the supervisor, I guess, the way she came across was more of a kind of trying to fix everything. Mm-hmm. And I think, I'm not sure, but maybe that part of her may have kind of maybe shut some people down where it early felt maybe they couldn't say anything more, but.
And I don't know, because I was sitting next to her, and at one point really wanted to try and stop it. I was like, she's crossing the line, but,
Was she being a manager, caretaker, rather than just her own
Well, she was kind of going towards, we're starting to take a look at safety issues and started down that pathway instead of staying on the emotional,
right.
psychological
I'm
side.
doing a whole
And I felt the same thing you did at that point, Sue. Do I?
I was waiting for the breath or the pause so I could look across at the other guy and say, why don't you tell us something? Which she finally did do it, and I did. I said, okay, well, we're going to let him tell us.
Right. I was kind of stuck. I kind of felt what I always say.
Yeah. I knew what I wanted to say, but I needed time to jump in, right?
And we take a breath.
Any issues that you were expecting you didn't hear? I mean, they're pretty comprehensive.
Well, one of the things I know we didn't hear that, sometimes may come up was like, we didn't hear a spiritual component. And it doesn't have to be religious. It was just, usually you'll have a component that says, how come this happened or that kind of thing. And I really didn't hear that.
And if there are good people die versus
Right.
just bad people.
Right, we didn't hear it at all. We heard a lot about their lack of safety.
Yeah, that would have been angry and I would have expected.
Right, and it wasn't fair, it wasn't that. That's not the direction it took.
Yeah. So, making the assumption that all of us can be our own worst enemy, especially
mentioned about the supervisors again, the debriefing part. I mean, I covered it in the diffusing, but I forgot it in the debriefing part. I was like, yeah, maybe that might have helped, her to see the place or something like that.
But Dennis and I had the opportunity to jump in and we didn't. I guess because it was the exact same group, they heard it once, I wasn't too worried about it. You covered confidentiality, which was a big piece.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think it was that important.
I didn't feel anything that was significant. You miss it's often a challenge when you've done the diffusing and then the CISD, and I'm coming in with just the tail end of the CISD part. But I remember thinking while you were doing the introduction that, gee, you didn't talk about this or you didn't talk about that. I thought we adequately covered the pieces.
And as for the rest of the question,
There were a part when I was doing the symptom phase, and because they had taught so much about various stuff, I wanted to touch on it, but I didn't really want to spend a lot of time. And then later I was kind of saying, okay, did you speed that up too much? Did that not fit? Should you give them more time? And I just don't know. I know I touched on stuff, but I didn't really give them much opportunity to talk in the symptom phase.
So it seems like they were kind of sharing a lot of symptoms early on.
That was my sense.
Yeah, you covered, you hit all the themes. I mean, they had all mentioned the grief, the scare, the anger, the pissed, the frustration, the what ifs. So, and they'd done it for us already, which you didn't know. So they had done it a couple of times. Each time more came out. So I think it was all covered. I think they were at that point, they had put it out on the table for us.
Well, it kind of felt right not to do it. I just wasn't sure.
No, you were right on.
what about you, Sue?
The only thing that, there were two things, and I've shared one with Harvey already. About halfway through the diffusing, I looked at him and went, gee, Harvey and I have never done this together. And that moment of fear cropped up, and I went, oh. But then it went away, it was that, but it always works, so that. And then with the supervisor, wanting to, I felt myself leaning forward, really wanting to stop, wanted the right opportunity, but then looking at both of them and they're not jumping in, going, okay, it's okay.
That's because I'm trying to figure out what to say.
There was that, and then I was also, well, okay, so this is Sue's section. Sue can do this. But Dan, if she doesn't do it at the next breath, I'm going to. And then he did it, of course.
And I think that's what I was waiting for, because she was long-winded.
Yeah. I had that same appreciation in the CISD as you guys were working, going, I've never worked for these two before. This is pretty comfortable. Because I could kind of predict where you were going to be. I appreciated it when you slid back in at a couple of different points to redo stuff. And I can remember just sitting there going, it's really nice to work with experienced people and not have to feel like.
I wasn't stressed. There was no anxiety. Did I forget something? Did I miss something? Am I watching everybody? It was like, they're doing their part. I only have to do my part.
That's really unusual in my experience.
Yeah.
And I felt pretty safe too. It's like if I couldn't remember something, or if I was stuck, I knew Sue or Dennis could pick right up, or I guess it was kind of a way that, even though we haven't really worked together, in this capacity, it was almost like we kind of understood kind of where we're at.
Well, I think it goes back to the model. As much as we've all done it, we haven't done that much together, the three of us, and it worked.
No, you've done enough together to know, to have a high level of trust.
Yes, the trust was definitely there, but that feeling of that comfort, I guess that's the word. It was comfortable, exhausted as you must be in this process. This was.
There wasn't any kind of anxiety.
I never watched the clock. I never looked at the clock, which in some of the debriefings, diffusings, we've all done it.
Sure.
Oh, when is this going to get done?
It didn't happen. I like the way I felt in the past. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And it sounds like at the end, you felt like this was a worthwhile thing. Good use of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to take them some time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For very inexperienced, I think, for us, because we've done the work with the first responders, they bounce back a little bit quicker from this, but the sight of blood or the touching of the blood, which he didn't share that for a long time.
Yeah.
He didn't bring out that he had his hands in.
No.
But there must have been a lot of people who saw a lot of violence.
Yeah, especially the one I think it was great. He was actually confronted with the government.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just kind of one of those that's going to stick with you. Well, because, you're talking, I thought I was going to die.
Absolutely. So, what are you going to do to take care of yourself extra special tonight?
I know, Barbie's.
I'm going to get a little dab in there that I think I'm going to go and maybe see a movie or for sure going to get some ice cream and some French vanilla.
Good.
It's always a good movie.
A few soft treats.
Mine would be animal therapy, dogs or horses, not sure which yet. Depends on what time they get home.
Talk to the animals. That's a good one.
Probably like Harley, Harley's my dog. Harley's I might actually, because the weather is finally changing and I have dry pavement that I can get to, Harley and I might take a walk tonight to let him blow off some steam and kind of relax. Then there'll be a little comfort food. And I'll probably stop at the video store on my way home and pick out some kind of violent movie to relax myself with.
I'm not sure. The source anymore.
The video, I was on the corner, he's just listening to 300. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's real nice.
Nice and
Right. Not that we're really going to plug in for it, but
yeah.
So it's worth doing, everybody felt comfortable, you would do it again?
Absolutely.
Okay, good, thank you very much.
Thanks for chatting with us.
Yeah.
You bet.
Thanks for being involved.
And as you tell your participants, if something changes and you start bothering yourself about something, please give me a call.
You know your number?
Because I've been there before. Probably done the same kind of thing myself.
Absolutely.
We'll do.
But don't forget to be nice to yourself.
So I should have set the stage, but we had just spent 3.5, 4 hours doing role play. So we were doing it, the MCRA was doing video. So literally Harvey and Sue had just done a diffusing, 20-minute break, and then we went in and did the CISD, 10-minute break, and now we're doing the pass. So what I want to point out here with the pass is this really wasn't a role play. This was us authentically talking about what we thought we had done well or not so well in the actual interventions. Okay? Questions or comments about how Paul did anything or about the structure? Yep.
I might have missed something, Dennis. I was just surprised that they spoke about a defuse and a debrief happening at the same time.
No, they were back. They would have been. I think we had theoretically defusing took place, and we were back either the next day or the day after.
Okay.
It just so happens that we did it that day.
Right.
And we taped them that.
Yeah,
That
okay.
day. Yeah. No, they were appropriately spaced in real life. Would have been. There's not in the video world.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just check?
Hang on, I can't hear you.
Sorry. For whoever that's leading the team in this session, is it, does he or she oblige to take down notes for further improvement of the next session, things like that, or should it be done in a subsequent session after the task is performed?
So her question was, Paul, in this case, in performing the post-action staff support, should he have been taking some notes? Probably not, but if we'd done a lessons learned, it would have been better if we had done this or posted that. He might have jotted some of that down to either come back to the team and look at our operating procedures or put some information around if this happens again, don't. So if we have some true lessons learned, yeah, we're going to write those down. But in terms of what Paul or what Harvey and Sue and I I don't think there was nothing came up out of there that would alter kind of what we were doing. Yep.
Just in relation to that question, it comes down to policy and the way in which it's used. So if it is generally applied and it's something that is natural because it's goodness, you know, and there's two measures to it. It's one about the self-care of the team. There's also the other element associated with a quality control. You know, what we were asked to do, did we do it? Or did we have to do something different because we discovered something different when we arrived? So that's good. When it comes down to a supervision element, then you might take notes. But generally the pass model, in my opinion, shouldn't be taking notes. The only thing that we do in my program is to account for the fact that it occurred.
Yep.
And not about the content of that. The only way that changes if it becomes more of a clinical supervision requirement, and then you have to be very clear about the parameters of the use of that information.
Right. So I think I was going to go with where Paul was too. The only difference would be is if one of the team members broke down during it and had been dramatically affected, I probably wouldn't so much take notes. So who's the clinical director, who's in charge of the team, information to them to do the follow-up kind of stuff. And I can tell you, there was one occasion, all of these that I've done over the years, and it wasn't really a breakdown. It was somebody. It was a line of duty death, medical helicopter crashed and killed the patient and the medical staff there. And one of the team members, and then we were responding to a different one. We were responding to that one, but 6 or 8 months before, a friend of hers had died in a similar scenario, and she didn't tell us. So she's in doing the work, and suddenly checks out, and the team comes in and takes care of business. When we're doing the pass, she said, I thought I had put it away, but when they described such and such, I went right to my friend. Didn't have to write anything down, but we talked more then about the importance of, and I put her kind of on inactive duty for the next 6 months. And the inactive just meant don't call for 6 months, give her more time to put it through. So that's about the only time that we had someone that wasn't paying attention to good self-care.
Did you have a conversation with her
Oh,
before you put her on?
Yeah, when we were done. In the Midwest Michigan team, we have a team leader who's elected. Well, all of us are elected, and I typically serve the role of the clinical director. Occasionally, somebody will step up and take it, and I can sit back for a couple of years. So it was in that case, it was my role as clinical director to sit down and chat with her, and then the team leader just put a note in the call out. And it wasn't a punishment.
Oh, no.
It's around. Paul had, when he was coordinator of the community team, had kind of a running policy. If you got married, you weren't going to get a call out for about 6 months. If you had a baby, you weren't going to get a call out for about 6 months. If you got divorced, you weren't going to get a call out for about 6 months. If you moved, you might not get a call out for about 6 months. And he had a big enough team that he could kind of do that. And all he was trying to pay attention to was anytime you had a major kind of change in your life that he was aware of, let's lighten the load for a little bit. Let the dust settle. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
I was going to as I re-listened to this, one of the things that stuck out for me is that as we had never done a debriefing like this before together, even though we're on the MCR board and put things together and trainings and stuff like that. But it just spoke to him. He was right. As we were doing this, it actually wasn't debriefing of what we did. And it was actually pretty, when you look back at the process, it did run pretty smooth, like we had done this a lot and stuff like that. So it just, as we were going through the past, it just reaffirmed learned that if we stick to the model and what we're trained to do, then no matter who you're working with, that shouldn't too much be a problem, because usually you might see that in the past that might come up.
Yes, sir.
We're challenged a little bit by geography in that we get dispatched. We have members all over the province of British Columbia, and we get dispatched to the event from wherever we're from. And so we often meet as a team right after, where we get dispatched to 2 or 3 there. And we meet as a team after the event, and we do this. And then we have to check in by our dispatcher by phone. Okay, so you can't have team B when we get us and do this. What are your thoughts on phone thing?
Well, again, one of the things I would think about, if you knew you had a particularly difficult one, can you be someplace with a phone and have your team lead call in and lead the pass? I don't think you physically necessarily would have to be there, as long as you have a speakerphone that you can all hear.
Right.
And the idea, again, my idea, to do whatever you want with it, is that for the ones that are particularly, potentially line of duty death, significant line of duty injury, those kind of things, I find it extremely comforting to have somebody who wasn't there do it with us. So, but I think that all about it, absolutely. Absolutely. And probably better, because again, my fear is, because I know me, okay? So when we were going to go into this police department, knowing me, we'd have done it, and then I would have done the pass. And knowing me, that's really stupid. Because I'm in the midst of it, we're all caught up in it, and how do I talk about what my reactions were, and I'm trying to facilitate this process with the team. Now, on regular ones, yeah, that's not so much. The powerful ones, I think it's really important to have that abstract voice, be it telephonic or otherwise, to do it. Dan?
Yeah, we do it a bit different. Our team started in '88, and when we took their training in the past, that gave us the structure we've been trying to do. And what we do, we have 4 rural teams and 1 metro. I don't know what the hell.
He's up in Minnesota.
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
But what we do is, no matter where we are, we drive to it. It doesn't matter if it's going to be 40 miles away at the nearest. So we have a place we meet, and we all get in the same car and we go there. We do the intervention, we do the follow-up, do coffee clutch, make sure they're okay, and then we get in the car. But we don't talk about it. And we're going to have our pass, but we're going to have it wherever our car's been.
Yeah.
And
take a little time to debrief in your brain while you're
so everybody's kind of letting it settle in, and we start that, and the structure has been for the 20 years is what we're interested. Go around, what did you like about this?
Yeah.
What was the worst thing for you? What hit you where you live?
Yeah.
If somebody did something they shouldn't, slap them.
Yeah.
Why'd you do that? And what were you thinking?
What were you thinking?
And every
How
time
might
they
you do
did
that
one
better?
All I thought was, you dumb son of a bitch, but
But he does it lovingly.
I wouldn't say that. They say that they're the
I know, exactly.
I felt so guilty. And I said, well, that's fine. That's what we're working through.
Yeah.
And also, that's when we decide who does our follow-up. And our follow-up system was built from what you shared already. We do one 24 hours. We do 3 weeks, 3 months, and 51 weeks. And that 51-week one just reminded them that we're available.
Gotcha.
You don't have to remind them about the event. Remind them you're available. And about 1 out of 6 times we get called to do an anniversary. And we get more thank yous for that than we do for the other.
If you're operating in a rural area, Dan's the author of a book about doing CISM in rural areas.
Rural emergency response.
One of the best books written on the subject, because it talks about what do you do when everybody knows everybody else, kind of thing, which is for those of us in the more metro area really going. So they got it out at the bookstore.
I don't know if they're right.
All right, may have to go on Amazon or talk to Dan, because it's a great way.
What's the name?
The
Rural emergency response, RER.
Rural Emergency Response, RER. Dan Casey. Other variations, what do you guys do? Those of you that have been regularly doing it.
We're doing, we have a body system actually. We're doing mostly on air traffic controller from Copenhagen, and I'm leader of the system team.
I knew I recognized you. Welcome back here.
Thank you.
I got a chance to do some work with them a few years back.
So we do a body system. We do mostly one-on-one, mostly on the telephones, and each peer had another body. So they do afterwards. They do a pass there. If we have a diffusing or debriefing, we do almost the same stuff as I teach. So and then we meet 2 times a year. But then we have our psychologist with us, and we're doing around supervision. So everybody can have a chance to, if it's really feeling around, have a chance to tell about it. So they work really good for us.
Think about air traffic controllers, it's a whole different kind of stress situation.
Using it because we've had to be do deployments in disaster zones such as Puerto Rico and Haiti, and those incidents. We're taking a diversity team to deal with issues, and so we've had to modify PASS in the sense of having a PASS at the end of the day with our teams that have gone out, just to make sure what's going on based on, especially when you're dealing with some faculty and students that haven't seen science before, to really pay attention to that and go through that.
So our idea, as I said, when we were doing the response with Papa 17 years ago, was we knew I wanted to make sure the team I was with, we're doing check-ins every night, but we're not going to do a full one because we're girding our loins to go back to work the next day. But it's just a quick check-in. We didn't always work together during the course of the day. They mixed and matched us from time to time. And then, like I said, the Friday we were getting ready to leave, Paul had been there with the team 2 weeks before me, and somehow or other they went to him and said, would you be willing to do the debriefers in those days? And he said, sure. And he said, well, this is the model we used. And we handed him a piece of paper, which was the original article that he and I had written. And he kind of laughed, yeah, I kind of know how to do that. And they did that on Friday afternoon. But based on some of the big disaster stuff that ICSF, and I remember Jeff talking about when you're on that multi-day kind of stuff, you have to postpone a little bit before you do some of the interventions that you do, because people need to have the dust settled. So we use that to say, well, if we're going to be there for a week, 5 days, and you got a weekend, then we ought to do an official pass again back home, just to make sure. So we got home on Friday. The team I was with got home on a Friday. Went through the weekend. The team had scheduled us for Thursday, 6 o'clock. 1 week. We were just under the deadline. And we pulled in, and we were meeting at a church. We pulled into the parking lot, all 3 cops and me, 6:59. Not that we want, we're going to be there, we're going to be on time. And we walk in together. I said, how you doing? How you doing? I always love telling stories about how smart I am. I'm doing fine. Yeah, I'm doing fine. Great. 20 minutes, we'll be out of here. Home in time for dinner. 2 hours later, when we were leaving, it was, didn't know I was carrying all that crap. Didn't know I was carrying some of this stuff. Now, would we have been okay if we hadn't done it? Would most of our personnel survive if we weren't around? Probably. But boy, it sure felt good to let go of that stuff. So, and for me, the thing, I find when I'm on the other side of the table on the receiving end of a diffusing or the receiving end of a CISD, and in this case, the receiving end of a pass, it doesn't matter how much experience I've had, how much training I had done, or being one of the primary authors of it. When the questions are coming up, I'm thinking about the questions. I'm not critiquing the team. I have nothing about that. It's really the introspection, what's kind of going on with me. And I think that ultimately that's kind of the magic of what we do and when we do it. So if we believe in what we're doing for everybody else for whom we do this work, shouldn't we ought to believe in it for ourselves too? Thanks so much for starting off the morning with me. Have a great afternoon, and you've got 9 minutes to get to the next one.